Anybody in the back? There's more space to sit in the front, so if you want to sit on the floor with me up here, you're more than welcome.
Okay. Yeah, so thanks for coming. Yeah, my name's Laurel. I'm a designer and writer, and I teach interaction design in art schools. And I specifically start my classes by just talking about a history of the web. And so yeah, so I like look at its like original values and how they've changed over time. Not necessarily because they wanted to change, but just like the way things happened. And it was only like a year, or no, like 6 months ago that I started getting excited about the peer-to-peer web, so I'm like quite new. But I just felt like my excitement turned palpable when I downloaded Beaker Browser, just because it was like so direct and made their values like really clear and easy for anyone to use because it was in the form of a web browser, which is like this ubiquitous portal to view the web. Yeah, so I just want to, through this talk, I'm going to take you through my journey. This is my favicon for my blog, and so that was like the main project I did that I'm going to tell you about. I basically decided that I would only blog to Beaker Browser exclusively while I was in motion, so like either on a train or a plane, maybe even walking, but I haven't done that yet. Yeah, and I want to emphasize like my interest is in creative potential for the peer-to-peer web, maybe more on like a daily level. Yeah. Anyway, so this story starts about a year ago. I was on a 12-hour flight playing Pokemon Moon for Nintendo 3DS. I actually really love long flights, as long as like I'm not in the middle seat. I try to take advantage of like this special time away from Wi-Fi to do something completely immersive or reflective. And I usually don't play video games in my everyday life, so I like to like carve out big chunks of time to just like get it over with. I've also been playing every Pokemon since like the beginning, so just like kind of a yearly ritual for me. And so in this iteration of Pokemon, there's a new thing. There's a coffee station at each Poke Center throughout the game. And so when you order a drink, the barista would talk to you. And at first he said pretty basic stuff about coffee, like just one sip and you'll be hooked, or things like this. But like eventually he zooms out to be like, coffee is like important in this philosophical way because it takes us out of the everyday hustle and bustle. And yeah, he just like offered these musings about time. So they say time is money, but time itself is actually really important. Once time has passed you by, it will never come back, and no one is selling more time. And then my favorite one, those who keep moving have more time than those who don't move at all. And then in this game, you're literally moving throughout cities, so it's like adventure based. So he's like fueling you on to the next barista center. This is so yeah. I've been thinking about how movement, whether internal or external, is connected to listening, attention, and self-reflection. Like anyone, oftentimes I need to write to figure out what I'm actually thinking. It's a form of internal listening. You could also say, oh yeah, I also take walks to do a similar thing. And I even sometimes write while I walk. And actually this part of the talk I wrote last night while walking over the Manhattan Bridge right before sunset on my iPod. So speaking of listening, let's listen to an old sound many of you might know. So if you connected to the internet before the 2000s, you probably remember this particular sound. And it's actually called a handshake. It's a telephone conversation between two modems. Many of you probably know Olia Leolina, the net art Russian pioneer, net art pioneer artist. She's been making work since the birth of the web, late 80s, 90s. And in the past, she's spoken about her early influences, or not influences, how her location and actually connectivity influenced her work. Specifically her country's connectivity, Russia's. She said that we were the people with the slow connection who had time to think about what the connection meant. It was an effort to connect. That's why we were reflecting on it. That's why our work was different. The people with the fast internet just started to put their flash files online. And speaking of the history of the web, I really enjoyed Tara Vansel's talk last fall from this series in Los Angeles. She talked about the history of the web and how it led up to Beaker Browser. And so, I just want to shout out, I think all these talks being documented is really great, and I would encourage you, if you haven't already viewed them, to view Tara's and the other great ones in the series. Sam already showed this, but walled gardens, content factories, something we want. And this is a recent drawing by Luis Drula and Raphael Bastide. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing your names. And this was actually an artwork in the Peer 2 thing that John Kyle curated. But I think this is a nice drawing. And one thing I want to point out is that the spider is very relaxed. Having time to think, maybe like playing the dial-up song. Handshake. So I don't know. I would encourage us all to take a moment of relaxation to think about the web we want. So just to get everyone on the same page, and I'm sorry if you all know this, but I'm just going to show a really basic demo of Beaker Browser. So you download it, beakerbrowser.com, you open it. The really unique thing about Beaker Browser is you can create a website right within the browser. So you give it a title, you create it, and all the files for the website live on your computer. So you can whip up an index.html, save it in the website's folder, preview it. Oh yeah, and if it looks good, you can review it and publish it. And then you get this unique 64-character crazy-looking URL on the DAT protocol. And you have a website that's served from your computer. And then one other thing I want to show about Beaker Browser that I really like. Basically, you can add websites on it. Oh yeah, so I'm disconnecting from my coffee shop Wi-Fi. You can view websites offline that you have saved previously. And so here I saved Tara's cat site. So I can view this offline at my leisure. But I've been thinking what I really realized I liked about this was reading offline. Because I don't know about you, but I literally can't read an article online because I feel like the internet pulsing through my veins and wanting to open a new tab. So I don't know. I've been gravitating towards saving websites that are writing. And this is a great essay about Scuttlebutt by Zach Mandeville called "The Future Will Be Technical." Oh yeah, and so this might be obvious, but these are the two principles I'm most excited about that Beaker Browser makes very obvious. Your computer becomes the server. If your computer is connected, then people can view your website. And that's Okay, and then offline first, which you already mentioned. That's actually like probably, yeah, the part that I'm like most excited about, I guess, just because I can like finally read online again. Maybe like I mean that's like my own selfish reason, but I think it has like many broad um, applications for the world and humanity. Um, yeah, and offline first, I I started to read about it, and there's even like a whole offline first camp. You know, the idea is that you design for the most constrained environment. You know, mobile first is you're designing for the mobile. Offline first, you design for the lowest connectivity as your priority. Um, and yeah, why don't like Google Maps work better offline? Why, yeah, in a humanitarian sphere, like, yeah, why can't people get like better access to healthcare knowledge in developing countries? Um, and yeah, I think both of these are about leveling the playing field, like making it really easy. The first one for anyone to have a website, just like boot it up from your computer. The second one, um, like it shouldn't matter your connectivity to access knowledge. Just like yeah, I think this is a quote. We want always we always want access to our data regardless of network connection. Yeah. And I think we, as like very privileged, hyper-connected people, like people in developing countries need more access to the internet. I feel like we need less access sometimes, or at least we need the power to control that access. And I'm personally interested in moments, maybe they're almost like mini self-inflicted apocalypses, where we can like self-reflect and sit with our thoughts. Um, yeah. So I don't know. I'm interested in like merging offline into our everyday lifestyle. And I was really rocked like a year ago when I read this article, The Coming Age of Calm Technology by John Seeley Brown and Mark Weiser from 1996. They were working at Xerox PARC at the time. The article basically says that information overload will continue to be a problem as we like approach this ubiquitous computing, like phones everywhere, Internet of Things, like computers in our everyday lives, and yeah, they said like it almost seems nonsensical that the way to become attuned to more information is to attend to it less. And actually, one of my favorite parts about the article, I'm not sure if they like intended this to be like a really cool part, but they zoomed out about technology, and I'm just going to read this quote. They say, the social impact of embedded computers may be analogous to two other technologies that have become ubiquitous. The first is writing, which is found everywhere from clothes labels to billboards. The second is electricity, which surges invisibly through the walls of every home, office, and car. Writing and electricity became so commonplace, so unremarkable, that we forget their huge impact on everyday life. So writing and electricity are technologies we forget that we have. Okay, so back to coffee. I was saying before that like we privileged people need more moments to self-reflect, like more, I think, like rituals to do this. Sometimes establishments force it on us, which can be good and bad. This is an ambigram representing the group OLIPO. OLIPO is a French acronym that roughly translates to Workshop of Potential Literature. It was mostly founded by like French writers and mathematicians in the 60s. I've taken a lot of inspiration from them in my practice. Basically, they're all about making self-imposed constraints on yourself, usually through the form of writing, to generate like the most creativity. And this ambigram, can be read both ways. So they're interested in games. Many of my own project involve self-imposed rituals or constraints. And I think this goes back like I'm really interested in a web that thinks with you. Like I feel like the web is an inherently self-perfecting medium, and which is similar to the writing process. So I wanted to create a constraint for myself because I wanted to write more and like think more, I guess, that would work with my lifestyle. So for the first time this semester, I was teaching two places, Rutgers and New Haven. Yale. It was kind of intense because it was like, what is it? Mondays New Haven, Tuesdays New Brunswick. I was taking two different train lines, and so I just decided I would blog while I was on the train, and I would create a Beaker browser exclusive blog. One cool thing about trains is that they have punctuation built in. They have stops. Actually, the link between Oulipo and this is that Oulipians have this constraint called the metro poem, and the idea is that you can compose a poem using the stops of the metro as your constraint. So I think it's like you spend the train ride thinking about your verse, and then when the train stops, you write it down. And then, the next time you're thinking about your next verse, and then when it stops, you write it down. And I think like you write your final verse when you're on the platform of your destination. I titled my blog Ellipsis Notebook. And in the README file for my blog, I have this kind of existential quote from Enrique Villa Matas's novel, The Illogic of Castle, who said, "Was there ever a better drawing of the human condition than the ellipses, with their cheerful suspension of what, after all, only aspires to remain eternally suspended?" I forked my blog, actually. That's another cool thing about Beaker is that you can, just like if you see a site you like, you can say like create my site from this site. And also I like thinking about forks as like a branch and a path versus like the fork, the utensil, just because it's like a little more violent looking or something. So, whoa, I didn't anticipate that. So this is how you fork in Beaker. You just say make an editable copy. So I'm going to take you on a quick tour of my blog. Also, it's like a little embarrassing, but no, not embarrassing. It's just like my journal, So yeah. And this is Casey's blog. He forked from like the default starter template. So some of these are like kind of inherent to Beaker. So you enter my blog, Ellipsis Notebook. I tell you that it's imperfect. These are my posts. So this is my first post. I was like, hey, I'm typing while I'm running the train. I'm going to work on this website while I'm in motion. And so I've written, I guess that's like 6 posts, and I choose a color for each post. And then I also have these things called pages, which are things like I gradually update and add to. So there's, and please seed if you like this site. I need all the seeders I can get. I also like have what I'm reading, like kind of basic stuff. You can, and then this page called Beaker Core I've been thinking about with Casey. Like one thing that's cool about Beaker is that you can just have a markdown file and it will automatically convert into an HTML file. So there's that. That's basically it. So, I'm not really sure if I've been generating anything interesting, but I just went through my blog and kind of analyzed it for some themes. Oh, but before that, I want to talk about Beaker Core, which is like a term I developed with Casey. I think the thing I love about Beaker is that it makes it really easy for anyone to make a site. So low point of entry is so Beaker Core. I also think like maybe this is just like an intuition of mine. I feel text is very Beaker Core. It's also very early web, but I like saving text sites kind of because they don't take that much memory. But also I just like love reading when I'm offline. But also there's lots of bugs with Beaker. I don't know, or just like kind of mysterious still how it works. And sometimes I have to hash base when I didn't think I had to. I don't know. It's kind of complicated, but yeah, I also have a page called Questions and Dreams, and you can like read more about that there. Oh yeah, so one theme is context. Whenever I blog, I try to be like, hey, this is where I am, and I'm also like listening to some music, or like I'm going forwards or backwards, you know. I also just literally talk about trains, planes, and walking. Um, yeah, and I also talk about punctuation. And like, I view the blog entries as punctuations. I also talk about friendship. You know, I forked the site for my friend Casey Goen. Yeah, and in general, I just like feel like I want to read more of my friends' writing. Like, I would really rather read some writing than like cryptic tweet or Instagram post. I mean, I'm not saying everyone uses it that way, but I mean, I think a balance is really healthy, and I would just like to read more of my friends' writing. Oh yeah, and I have a friends page. And so if you want to build a Beaker browser exclusive site, please get in touch. Yeah, and shout out to Chris who's here. Kyle's not here; he's in San Francisco, but and then Casey can't be here, but yeah. And this quote from Kyle. So Kyle Mock gave a talk in my class earlier this year called "Peer-to-Peer Web: A More Personal Web." I think this question really highlights my own interest in it too. Any current website can be ported to a P2P site, but can we create something new and different for the P2P web? I guess maybe this stems from like kind of levels of intimacy. There's a term from the book A Pattern Language called intimacy gradient that I've been thinking a lot about, which basically says that in any public space, or no, in any like space, it could be like a building or something, there should be different levels of intimacy, and it should start from the most public and gradually go into more private sectors. And so I think they used like the example of a cafe on the street as a really good example, kind of how it like bleeds off into the street, and you can like gradually enter it or like go further back in the restaurant. Um, but yeah, I just kind of feel like we should utilize this space in a creative way. Um, you know, maybe I do want to make my posts more public at a certain point, but they're kind of weird, and I don't know. I don't really want everyone to see them right now. Yeah, so this is my Ellipsis notebook if you want to go. And I'm going to make this arena channel public right after this, but this has like all of info from my slides there. Oh yeah, and thanks to all these people and the donors. And yeah, and thanks to all present, past, future peer-to-peer lectures. And everybody who's watching on the live stream, and anyone who might be watching this in the future, and especially all of you here. And yeah, so yeah, that's all.